Hello and welcome back to Mark's Garden UK. Agapanthus, lily of the Nile. Today I'm going to propagate these by growing them from seed, and apparently you can get fresh blooms from these within 2 seasons. So it's worth doing. I'll also share some Agapanthus facts and figures and some care tips in this video. Now last year I had a complete disaster with my Agapanthus. I lost every single one. And these are new stock and they're all pure white, and I put them in this little garden here which I call my white garden. Anyway, one of the tricks I did with these was I left them in the original pot, so even though they look quite nice in this lovely square terracotta, they are actually still within the original pot which I bought them in. And that's one of the things about Agapanthus. They like to be cozy in their pots. They don't want to be completely root bound, but they do like to have a slightly restricted root growth, and that will encourage them to flower. Flowering is often a survival mechanism. If the plant feels under threat, it will push up flowers which eventually will become the seed, which is what we've got here, and that's one of the reasons why they like a slightly restricted root run. Now let me tell you what I've got together here before we get on to doing the propagation with the seeds. I'm very carefully handling these because I don't want to lose too many seeds at this point. You might be wondering what that is. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. So I have got some little mini seed trays with individual compartments. Now they're quite flexible and floppy, but happily they sit quite nicely into those thermoplastic seed trays. I've got 2 of those, and if I can manage to get a new plant in each one of those, I'll be a very happy man. So there we are, seed trays. I've got the parent plant here, and the blooms are at various different stages of maturity or going over, so I'll talk about that in a moment. I've got some compost, I've got some horticultural grit. Now in the truck here I've got some fleece and I've got some string. I've got a pair of scissors. Talk about that again in a moment. I've got a riddle. I've got a jug here with one of the blooms which I took off the other day. So what am I going to do? Well, let me talk to you about these Agapanthus seeds. It's best to harvest them when they've popped open, dried up and popped open and look like this one here. You can harvest them when they're still in the green state and dry them out yourself, but it's by far better to leave them on the plant and harvest them when they've reached that stage of bursting open. The problem I found is if I'm not careful, turn me back for 2 minutes and they burst open and all the seeds disappear. Either birds take them or the wind blows them away, or rodents have them. So I've come up with this ingenious idea here of basically cutting a piece of horticultural fleece, wrapping it round the seed head and tying it with string. It allows air through, so it won't get moist and rot, and you can see what's happening in there, and it lets the light through, and it's still attached to the plant. So that's the ideal solution, and by doing that, when I see that all those have popped open and given up their seeds, I can just prune that off, and that can become part of my seed stock. And if I put that upside down into a container, I'll gather up all the seeds. I've also got this little white tray here, and that's so that I can see the seeds, and also so that I can show you the seeds in close up. The seeds are black, so you'll see them against a white background. So what have I said so far? Agapanthus like a restricted root run. They like to be cozy in their pots. They like moist but very well drained soil. They like a hot sunny position, which is why I've got them here at the front of the cottage, south facing. And it's best to harvest the seeds when they've popped open, but if you're not careful you lose them all. So I've come up with this idea of just wrapping fleece around the head and saving them. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to gather up all the seed heads that have reached that stage of maturity and leave all the others. Now this will be part 1 of propagating Agapanthus from seed. Part 2 will be showing you the finished result in the spring when these start to pop up out of the ground. So part 2 will be a separate video which I will link up here towards the end of this one, so you will get to see the full process. But for now, just harvesting and sowing the seeds. So let's gather up all the seed heads that have already popped open, and just for now I'm going to drop them into this truck very, very gently, and that's what I shall do. So I've gathered up all the seeds into that truck. These two are still a little bit green, so as you can see I've wrapped the heads in horticultural fleece. I'm just going to put that to one side. Now I'm going to show you some of the seeds. So now in the shelter of this truck I've carefully and meticulously separated the seeds. They look a little bit like mouse droppings, and I'm just going to let them sit in this jug where they can't blow away. So there's my little collection of seeds, and let's go now and prepare the planting trays. So as far as the sowing mix is concerned, I've got some compost here. It's off the shelf compost. I've also got my riddle. And the reason I've got my riddle is I want to put this compost through this riddle because I want a nice fine potting medium. Some of this compost has bigger lumps in it, and I want to take those out, and that will aid contact of the soil with the seed. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some grit. Don't forget, with Agapanthus, drainage is the order of the day. So I'm just going to add some of this horticultural grit. Everything you see in this video is available as a product from my Amazon shop. The scissors, the grit, the trays, the lot. So if you want to, you can buy all this stuff. I'm just going to add a nice healthy handful of horticultural grit to that compost. That's what I'll be sowing the seeds onto. The other important thing is to always make sure that every single one of your holes has been pushed through, and these seed trays have got holes in so that these are never sitting in water because I don't want them to rot. Now, let's now almost fill that with compost. Not completely, but almost. And don't forget, this is compost and grit mixed together. It's about 3/4 compost, 1/4 grit, and we're just going to fill those about 90% full. Now I've got the luxury of these little individual plugs. You can actually broadcast these onto an open tray and separate them later, but this should make my life easier in the future. So there is a lovely sowing tray with individual compartments, and the next thing I'm going to do really simply is firm it down a little tiny bit, not too much, but I want the soil to be relatively in contact and compacted, but not too much. And then finally I'm going to sow one seed onto each of these, and there's a couple of reasons why I'm sowing one onto each one. It appeals to my analytical nature to see what success rate I get from this, so I'll be able to count. And also, if there's only one seed in each, I can let them grow a little bit further and mature a little bit more before I thin them out or separate them out. So as you can probably see, I've migrated to the back of the cottage because it was just a little bit too blowy around the front. So there's a little tip for you. Do it in a shady area, otherwise they'll all be gone with the wind. So got a white tray here. I've got my seed tray there with gritty compost, and I've got my grit here. Pretty obvious what I'm going to do next. I'm going to put one on each of these squares, and I'm going to take my gloves off for this because I won't see the black seeds against the black gloves. So let's just decant a few of those into there, not too many. That should be enough for now. And then very carefully, one at a time, we shall place one of these. Just let my finger onto that compost there, and another, and another. I'm checking my finger each time to make sure the seed has gone off it. So now each one of those little plugs has got a seed in it. It was fiddly and it was irritating. And I'm in not really in the right mood because I've not got very much patience at the moment because I've got a bit of a bad chest, but it'll be worth it because 3, 6, 24. No, hang on a minute. 4, 8, 24 potential little Agapanthus plants there. And all I'm going to do now is very gently cover them in grit, and that will anchor the seed, make sure it stays in contact with the soil below. And the other thing it will do is when these seedlings do sprout up, it will aid with drainage around the crown of the seedlings, which will prevent rot. So that's another benefit of having the grit on top. And I suppose the third benefit, if you need any more benefits, is because it's a lighter colour, you'll be able to see the little seedlings. Don't worry about the fact that this is actually coarse and heavy, because those seedlings will have no problem pushing up through that grit. That is going to stay outside all winter in a ventilated cold frame, and hopefully in the spring we'll have a lot of little Agapanthus plants. I'll keep it moist but well drained. And of course, if you want to know how it turns out, tune in for part 2. Subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and part 2 I'll put the link somewhere up here. And if you've got lots of free plants, free Agapanthus plants, and you want some and you're in the Nantwich area, let me know. You can come and collect them next spring. See you soon for some more Agapanthus seed sowing adventures. Bye for now.